Okay, our final speaker for today is Ruth Tarrant. Ruth is a credentialed mental health nurse, a compassion fatigue educator and secondary trauma specialist with a Masters in Mental Health from the University of Wollongong. And Ruth will be talking to us about compassion fatigue. So I think that follows quite nicely from what Julie was talking about in terms of clinical supervision. So welcome, Ruth.
Thanks, Kim. I do have a quiet voice, so I'm assuming everybody can hear me and the microphone's close enough. No? Okay, now can everybody hear me and the microphone's close enough? Excellent. So I'm not very good at standing still. I'm going to try and do that really well. As nurses, you get that standing still and thinking at the same time kind of don't go together. And sitting down at the end of a Friday afternoon, if this is the end of your work week and you'd like to go to sleep, then go for it. I'm not going to take any offence, whatever. This presentation will be up on the website. As the only internationally qualified compassion fatigue educator, I've made a website so that there is resources for you when you need them, because the information that's out there about compassion fatigue at the moment is a little bit skewed towards self-care, and self-care is only one aspect of how to get through a compassion fatigue or a secondary trauma experience. Okay, so the two are related, but I'm going to try very hard to sit with the actual context of this event and talk about compassion satisfaction as promised and renewal, okay, because that creates your career longevity. Compassion satisfaction is the depletion of who we are and how we work in our world. That's personally and professionally. Now, there's a lot of conceptual disclarity, is that a word, around compassion satisfaction. And the reason for that is that there are two arms of researchers that came across the idea of how depleted we get emotionally, physically, spiritually in our world as full-time, full-on helpers. All we do is give. And most of us don't receive anything back, right? So we had Charles Figley started off, and he said, rightio, then the whole idea of burnout, which Johnson coined as being, the depletion of who you are through your work because you suddenly hate it, or you hate your work, or you hate your boss, or you hate your organisation, or whatever it is. But that person, Johnson's a nurse. And so she was talking about something that we think maybe was compassion fatigue. Now, she's done a lot of work since then about compassion fatigue, and I'm going to leave my presentation fairly well because I'm going into something that I'm really interested in. Now, what happened with the concepts is that Charles Figley was very, very good at understanding secondary trauma as a social worker and understood how that affects you. And so he talked a lot about his experience and his understanding of how when somebody comes to you in a lot of trauma, you feel that. And then if you don't get rid of it, you take it home with you. And then day after day, client after client after client, patient after patient, you get a build-up of pain that carries into your personal life. And it affects your relationships, it affects your health, and it keeps you from living your optimal life. So he called it secondary trauma. I'm not going to talk about secondary trauma, but I want you to understand the concept of compassion fatigue, because compassion fatigue is the boat. Secondary trauma sits inside that boat. Okay, so trauma is a trauma response. Secondary trauma is a trauma. Okay, is anybody here highly trained in trauma or got training in trauma? Yeah, good. Somebody, a couple of people. So trauma responses are generally defined like post-traumatic stress disorder is defined through the DSM as having the three aspects of hyperarousal, avoidance, and intrusion. And intrusion is something that if you have compassion fatigue, you'll get a lot of that. If you have a trauma response, you'll get a lot of avoidance, you'll get a lot of intrusion as well, but you'll also get the hyperarousal. Thanks, Kim. I always get a very dry mouth when I'm talking. Thank you. So, compassion fatigue sits as the overarching concept here, and it's generally very well described but not defined very well. Okay, so compassion fatigue is that depletion, and I think that we relate to that really well. Okay, we go home and we're exhausted. 15 minutes on the couch, belly up, your eyes shut, in silence, is your best self-care. It's often the only thing that you really need or want in order to get on with your evening, to get on with the rest of your day. Okay. Now, there's an awful lot of stuff about compassion fatigue, and there's not very much about compassion satisfaction. So the thing that makes compassion fatigue okay to listen and to be with is your compassion satisfaction. And that's the joy that you get out of helping. That's the joy and that fulfillment that you get when you've helped somebody. And not many people talk about it, but it's really, really important. So compassion satisfaction is the antidote. And the thing that you want more of in your life is that understood, that stated, known understanding of what it is that's going well. And the way to get that is through training, through furthering your information, through getting more and more coming into you so that you can give more help and do really well. So there's a double-edged sword running there, right? Now, Beth Stam is one of the leading researchers, and she's developed the ProQual. And she has done it by saying, radio, then this positive aspect of compassion satisfaction balances the fatigue and the secondary trauma and the burnout that we get. All right. And so putting it all together, she's got this great thing. It's called the Professional Quality of Life, the ProQual. And that measures where you're really at, so how much pain you're actually feeling. Most of the other self-assessments that are available to us only measure the pain. They don't actually have the balance point. So, the balance point's obviously the tipping point as to whether or not you're okay with what you're doing. So 5 mini strategies that I wanted to offer you today for combating compassion fatigue and enabling career longevity, because compassion fatigue is the leading cause of nurse attrition. It's also the leading cause of bullying and the leading cause of illness and sickness and leave and all those sort of things. So we really need to look into it. So the number 1, develop and maintain professional networks. Coming to these events are really important. You will have noticed that you're talking to people, you're speaking with people and engaging with people that you haven't met before. And that relationship is very important. If you can maintain it, get each other's phone numbers, get each other's emails and stay in contact. Get together with people and say, that day we learned about these things. Right? That remembrance and that going back and then developing it further in the context of your work after the event is very, very useful for sustaining that compassion satisfaction. Okay. Identify and make sense of disruptive schemas. Has your exhaustion led to negative thinking? Now, Teresa Pipe and a heap of others have done these studies on negative thinking, and regardless of the fact that we don't want to go into Pollyanna thinking, where it's all pie in the sky already, but if we go into positive thinking and look for solution-oriented ways of coming up with a new way of doing something. So it may not be a fix, we don't have the resources. We've been in a system that's been broken for so long, I'm not sure we even know what having adequate resources would look like. But having enough resources and having enough ability to say, radio, then my thinking can impact how I am on the ward. My thinking can impact how I am with my colleagues. That group cohesiveness, that lack of bullying, the awareness that you have in order to reduce your own angst, your pain, your fear about not being enough. They're all combated really well if you get together and think about solutions, radio. Then this is what we have available to us and not a lot more. But what we do have available to us, we're going to use properly. We're going to be very active in making sure that we're good about it. And that relationship that we have with our colleagues is the key point for making resources go better. Okay, so don't go further, don't do anything, but we can work with our resources better. So it's our business, really, to become good at looking after our teams, caring for each other. So having a realistic tolerance for failure is kind of something that we just don't do. We are totally unreal about what it is that we expect from each other, what we expect from ourselves, even what we expect from our patients sometimes. And you see it a lot with the doctors. You see it with us a lot, but I'd like to use the doctor's example, partly because it's been in the news so much about their bullying and things, but also because it's a little bit removed from us, but we're very much affected by it. Their culture is very much about, if you're not in pain, then you're not good enough. You're not moving towards the goals that you want to go through. And so they work ridiculous hours. Who else does a 36-hour shift when they're supposed to be saving lives and making really important decisions that affect people's lives? Only doctors do that. And why would they do it? Do you know, they do it very often because they don't want to hand over a lot. And then when they make mistakes, when there's an adverse incident that goes on, the amount of impact and the amount of support isn't balanced out. Okay, so if somebody makes a really serious error, what happens to them? Where's the support system? Do we look after them? Do they look after each other? Nobody seems to look after each other in the healthcare arena. And it's very sad because these things, adverse incidences, secondary trauma, compassion, fatigue, are the leading causes of our high suicide rates, which is something we do not talk about to ourselves, to the outside world. But nurses and doctors suicide at a rate of 1.9 and 1.87, where 1 is the norm. And it's a terrible, terrible thing because a lot of it is because of our work. We're caring and giving out so much, but we're not caring for each other. It's not okay. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to look after each other. We're coming up to 2020. In that time, you know, we're going to have 1 in 2 people directly affected by cancer. So not diagnosed, but directly affected. And that's you and me as well. What happens when we go home and we say, well, you know what, I'm too crook. My cancer's taking over today. I can't go to work tomorrow. Or you know what, I hate this job. It's terrible that I have no resources. I had a bad time today. I'm afraid to go back there tomorrow and have a worse time or as bad a day today. So I'm going to take some time off and look after my sister who's got breast cancer in a really bad way. Okay, that's the decisions that we're going to be making very, very soon. And in order for us to actually get out of that, we have to be prepared. We have to be supporting each other. It's not okay to make a mistake and be on your own about it. All you got to do is to say, are you all right? I know you had a bad shift the other day. I know things went really well for you sometimes, but that day you had a bad day, you know. Do you want to talk? I'm with you. I feel it as well. You know, and sometimes what you got to do is just to say, you know, hey, I know, and I'm there for you. Most people don't need you to say anything or do anything. They just want you to be there, to be present, to be mindful, and actually know that they're not alone. Because isolation is the biggest thing that causes our suicide. Isolation and loss of hope. So having a realistic tolerance for failure is very important. And I wanted to mention somebody's study. Where is it? Pratt and Jackner wrote a fantastic article. If you can find it, I can send it out to you if you want it. About Jackner is a doctor and he had a terrible incident happen. And it took him a long time. He went into a secondary trauma response. He also went into a post-trauma response because it was him and he hurt directly as well. And so he even had suicidal ideations that he couldn't manage and needed a hand. But he didn't feel like it was okay to ask any of his friends, any of his colleagues, any of his supervisors for a hand because of the culture that we have. Now, how terrible is that? So they did a study on it. He got together with this guy and he found that something like 20% of surgeons have had suicidal ideation in some space within 3 months of an adverse action in surgery. And anaesthetists are a little bit higher than that. So you can imagine that this is a really big problem and we're not dealing with it well enough. And all it takes is attitude. You know, that's not a cost. Mini strategy number 4, identifying your particular vulnerabilities and attending to them as they're confronted. So, you know, in our days, we are going so fast all the time. We just don't stop. We don't even stop and wee. You know, like who else goes to work for the entire day? I know you're laughing because you know it's true, don't you? Who's guilty of not going to the toilet across an entire day? Should I ask the other question? Who's guilty of going to the toilet across the day? Good, thank you. One person in the room does go to the toilet every day? One person.
Don't look at me. Don't worry, all right.
Okay, do you think we've got a trouble there? Can you see the depleted nature of how we're thinking about ourselves? We just don't do it, all right? Now, who does not attend? Let me tell you a little story, and I shouldn't probably say this, but anyway. I worked a little while for a corporate bunch. They needed a hand, and I just happened to be Johnny on the spot. So I went in there, and you know what? Before morning tea, most of them had 4 toilet breaks. Then they had morning tea. Then they went and they had a whole hour for lunch. They even turned the lights off in the entire office while everybody left and went and had lunch. And I went into the boss and I said, what's going on? Where are all the lights? You know, like it's dark. How am I supposed to read this stuff? And he said, oh, no, it's lunchtime. Go. Get out of here. I'm like, okay. What do you do for a whole hour for lunch? There's only so much time it takes to eat something. There's only so much time, you know, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm a nurse. Nobody thinks this way, right? So then, you know, lunchtime happens in that office from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. By 2:15, I'm finding the first person's going to the toilet. I'm like, what happened here? What's going on? How many times do you guys go to the toilet? And here I am standing in a room of, 100 people, and how many of us go to the toilet every day? 1. There's only 1 smart person in the room. And I'm really sorry, but it's not me. And you're shaking your head, I'm not looking at that. Don't tell me that's not true. Oh, yeah. That's right. But, you know, it's still only 1 person. That's just wrong, isn't it? So, yeah, if you have a vulnerability, attend to it. Right? So other vulnerabilities that we have pretty regularly is when we go into moral distress. You know, something's happening and we've got to do X, Y, and Z, but we know morally, I wouldn't do that. I would prefer to see this. And it might be because that's what the patient wants that we're doing this other thing, or because the resources are not there, or for some other structural thing that's going wrong, okay, and we can't do it. If we don't attend to that, again, it wears us down. It makes us less in ourselves. It erodes our self-respect. And it's something that diminishes our professional identity because we don't understand that we're valued. We don't understand our professional identity as being something strong because we've got so much stuff that's going on that's conflicted in our bellies. Okay. And on this note too, I just wanted to mention as well, I know we've just spoken about clinical supervision, but clinical supervision in a lot of places and a lot of people that I've spoken to is seen to be a punishment. It's what you do when something went wrong and you need help because, you know, you're inadequate, bad, wrong, you're not allowed to be all those things, remember, right? So if you go to a clinical supervisor that you paid for and therefore you chose and can claim on your tax, because I'm not an accountant, can't advise you on this, but it's tax deductible, okay, then you can choose the supervisor of your need that works for you. And if you get good supervision going on, you will feel good, you'll feel confidence, you'll feel stronger, you'll feel more skilled, and you might even feel cared about. Right? Going to counselling is decadent. Going to supervision is intelligent. Okay? If you can combine the two by going to a supervisor who happens to be a counsellor, a psychologist or a nurse who actually works and does these things and knows about stuff, what a great thing to do. An hour. What would you pay for an hour of being looked after, properly looked after? You know, when I needed it, I know I'd pay $1,000 for it, easy. They don't charge $1,000, but, you know, I'd pay anything on those days where you need a hand and you need a little bit more smarts and you need someone just to support you in that time when you're just not sure. So good supervision. I hope you're feeling good, confident, strong. Okay, so do that and pay for it because then nobody's going to tell you you've got to keep coming back. You can say, no, I'm going to sack you. I'm going somewhere else. Mini strategy number 5. Ensure adequate recovery time in witnessing someone's trauma experience. So no matter what kind of work that you do see people in pain. Nobody comes to a nurse because they're having a good day. All right. Always, we've got people that are coming to us because something's wrong and, oh my Lord, what do I do? Help me. Okay. So when someone's suffering and then you're hurting because of what they're going through, if you're not attending to that, then that builds, okay? So we have the strength, we have a lot of ability to go with that and we actually benefit from that. And I'll talk about our benefits in a minute. But if you're not attending and recovering by taking time out and away, then it builds and it stays. All right, you have to actually physically remove yourself from that environment and to think differently and to think anew. So downtime, if you're a manager, how many managers in the room? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, a few. Okay. Yeah. If you've got somebody that's had a bad time or that's just gone because of whatever they've seen or understood or witnessed or whatever it is, then tell them, go to the loo, go for a walk for 5 minutes. My first mental health job, I've been a mental health job since 1994 was my first job. And it was in a big old-fashioned asylum, and acres of land. And we had a really bad day one day, and the head nurse said, right, everybody's going for a walk for 10 minutes. Who's going first? No, we don't do that anymore. Imagine doing that. But that's your recovery period. That's your downtime. That's that time to refuel, to renew, to get back in touch with the soles of your feet, to come back down to earth and be you again. All right, we need those minutes in our day. So renewal is a really important aspect of creating a long career and a satisfying career. Satisfying careers don't just come, they are built, they're developed. And you have to take some time out occasionally to make steps, goals, to make the bigger picture, to make the little picture, whatever it is, in the context of your life. Okay, so you're not here just in order to be able to go forward and become that person. In the corporate world, you might want to become the partner. And there's the steps, we don't have any of that, and we kind of go into management, we kind of go into education in order to get away from the floor because we've had enough of all this other stuff. And I haven't moved in thingy. I want to talk about positivity, but I think I've done enough about positivity. I'm probably running short of time. Renewal. I haven't really talked about renewal very much. I did almost a 2-year diploma on self-care, renewal being the central theme. Okay, renewal, if you're not knowing how to renew your spirit, it's by understanding what it is that inspires you. Okay, it's not necessarily about a religion or about a spiritual orientation, but it might be. But it is always about something that inspires you and reminds you of the bigger purpose of your life. We as healthcare professionals have a lot of purpose. We have a lot of meaning in our life. The rest of the world don't. They are looking for meaning. They pay people to find some meaning in their life. Now, I'm not even going to ask you. I know that doesn't make sense to us, right? We are overwhelmed with purpose and meaning, right? But when we don't understand what fuels our inspiration, then we can lose it. We can lose our individual identity around what it is that we're doing on this planet. We're not just here to be yet another nurse carrying out and propping up a system that's been broken for generations. Okay. The ability to stimulate your mind. Where is it that you learn stuff from? These are all things that directly combat compassion fatigue. That's why I'm talking about them, okay? Getting your inspiration going. Close your eyes. Don't just and stimulate your mind. If you don't know where it is that you can get some information, get onto TED, TED.com. Has everybody heard of TED.com? Yeah, get on there. There's so many fantastic things. And if you get onto the nature part, search through just all the nature things. There's not people and stories and stuff that you have to be concerned about. All this deep blue underwater stuff, the space stuff, fantastic stuff for inspiring your mind, thinking outside of what we normally do. And that opens up our neural networks in order to expand. And as those neural networks expand, rejuvenate, then we grow. And we grow into something that we admire because we've grown through something that inspired us. Okay, your emotional self. What do you do for your emotional self? If you're exhausted at the end of the day and you've had a rough time, what do you do? Do you spend 15 minutes belly up on the lounge? And if you do, what are you doing? Are you reminiscing through all that nasty stuff? Are you going over it? No, I should have done this, that should have happened, this shouldn't happen. Are you getting angry as you're talking? Are you doing that sort of stuff? Or are you 15 minutes belly up on the lounge going, I am so fantastic. I'm out of work. Isn't that fantastic? Oh, I don't have to go back there for another however many hours. That's kind of neutral. Or are you saying, rightio then, I'm here, I'm nurturing myself, and I'm just looking after myself. And all I need right now is to be a little bit mindful. If you're into mindfulness, we need to be a little bit self-encouraging. So, you've done these great things and remind yourself of what's gone well, not just across the day, but across your career. That career development thing is really important. Now, the idea of positive and negative thinking while you're belly up 15 minutes on the lounge, what you're doing is you are combating your negativity. So the idea of being a positive thinker is to be less negative on the outside, but to experience less negativity on the inside. It doesn't mean taking away your negative thoughts, right? Because that's just not possible. That's not going to happen. You know, we're realists. And in order to take away your negative thoughts, you're kind of denying something or you're avoiding something. So instead, just go, right, that was a negative thought. I'm having another positive thought over here. Okay. And then increase your ratio of positivity to negativity. And every time you have a positive thought, add another one to it. That was a good thought. That's a good way of doing something. You know? Can you supplement it with wine? Oh, look, you know, if you've got a supplement, I'm not going to have a problem with that, so long as you're not going to become a wino. I'll just go back there. Now, I've just got a little tongue-in-cheek thing at the back here. And I shouldn't say that. If you want to be a wino, then go for it. I'm not going to be thingy. Then just do it for, 20 minutes at a time. Yeah, is that possible? So I thought to end the day, what you need is something a little bit different. So I put up a list of things to increase your risk of hurting, of getting compassion fatigue. Okay, you can read through those, and I know that pretty well all of them you've experienced every moment of every day that you've ever been at work in some remote thought, hearing stuff that's going on. Okay. All right then, so in a nutshell, combating compassion fatigue is about increasing compassion satisfaction. It's about knowing and understanding what works for you inside yourself as a person, in your relationships, in the world around you, as well as in your physical body. And it's about supporting each other. Something goes wrong, don't tell somebody off. It's not going to help them. That doesn't help you. It doesn't really make a great learning environment. If something goes wrong, then say, hey, that didn't go well. What's going to happen next time? What are we doing to make the world a better place in this situation? Now, on Tuesday, just while I'm here, having a breakfast, and we've got one international presenter now, not two. Francoise has got double pneumonia. So Patricia Fisher is a fantastic woman who knows extraordinarily rude amounts of stuff about how to make organisations healthier. And she's going to be coming via cyberspace to teach us how to do that and to show us. So she's only going to be there for a short period. It's only a breakfast. And then we're looking at having a symposium later on in the year. So I'd like to invite you all. There's a yellow flyer out on the registration desk for that. And I want to just say thanks for coming to these events. Do it more often. These events, even if you have to pay for them yourself, you should come. They're tax deductible. There's something that you can do to get out of the wards. A very useful compassion fatigue idea that I have seen across the place that works so well is to reduce your exposure to the wards and the people in suffering by 20%. So instead of working 5 days a week, choose 1 day a week where you're doing something different. Okay, it's still work, still paid work, but not necessarily exposed to people who are suffering. Okay, so do that, and these things are great in order to have that happen for you. So I wish you a long and happy career. Good luck, and hopefully in 2020 we'll still all be doing the do.